Robert, what's coming up on today's show?
Today, Kate, we have our most famous warrior queen, how she saw off the continental menace, and why you should always look at the weather forecast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Queens, Kings, and Dastardly Things. I'm Robert Hardman, Daily Mail columnist and royal biographer. I'm joined as ever by my colleague, Professor Kate Williams, historian, biographer. Kate, hello.
Hello, Robert.
And we are returning to the subject of the great Elizabeth I. Just because she was an extraordinary monarch, we're fascinated by her. Last week, you may recall, we looked at her really very challenging early years, how she dodged death several times. I mean, we all tend to think of sort of latter Elizabeth I and the famous portraits and things like the Armada. We'll be getting onto that today. But I mean, it was pretty miraculous that she ever survived to take the throne. In a nutshell, Elizabeth I, challenging start, mother's executed, she's nearly executed. What's the mood like when she comes to the throne?
She's on the throne, she's 25, and couldn't everything be great? Well, she has two problems, and really that's the fact that she's this small new religion country surrounded by Catholic Europe. And the other problem is, as we'll talk about in episode 3, is that straight away people are saying, you have to marry, because if you don't marry, then where's the throne going to go to next?
So she gets off to a good start, but the suitors are already queuing up. As you said, we're going to look at her quest or non-quest for Mr. Right or King Right later on. But it is important to realise at this stage that already the Spanish are looking to forge some sort of alliance with her, aren't they?
Yes, so Elizabeth, as we'll talk about, has at least 26 marriage proposals. So she's a very popular lady in that sense. But Philip of Spain is the first in there. Now, Philip of Spain was the husband of her sister, Mary I, but that doesn't stop him. Straight away, he thinks, aha, Elizabeth, I'm going to marry her. Now, he's actually been quite amenable to her during Mary's reign, I think because he thought, if she comes to the throne, I'm going to want to be on her side. He's this huge emperor. He's got huge amounts of land. He's incredibly powerful. And almost as soon as Elizabeth comes to the throne, he says, let's get married. And, well, he's a bit of a mansplainer, let's just put it that way. He says to Elizabeth, I can help you. I can guide you. I am Philip of Spain. Now, I called my robot vacuum Philip of Spain because it's always gobbling stuff up.
What do you mean? You've actually got sort of a house accessory and you call it Philip of Spain?
It's true.
Does it respond to that?
It's got an app. It's got an app, and I press Philip of Spain go, and off it goes, gobbling up things, gobbling up territories, gobbling up countries, and trying to gobble up ladies. So he's tried to gobble up Elizabeth. Now,
does he leave a sort of moderately decent time between the death of Mary before he starts hitting on her sister?
Well, no. And
is he even upset about Mary's death? I mean,
well, not exactly. I mean, people did remarry in those days pretty swiftly, but this is...
Well, we have to think that, Henry VIII married Catherine of Aragon, who'd been widowed by his older brother. So, I mean,
and of course, straight away after Anne Boleyn was executed, Henry VIII married Jane Seymour. He was very speedy, but that's a bit too extreme. But people do marry faster than we would because life is short. You have children. Women need money. But certainly, Philip of Spain is very fast there with Elizabeth because he knows she's a prize on the marriage market. He wants to get in there first. And he also thinks, I would say that Philip of Spain feels that Elizabeth owes him because he's often claimed that he's made Mary soften towards her during Mary's reign. I mean, essentially, I don't think Philip of Spain would have allowed Mary to execute Elizabeth, even if Mary had wanted to, which she doesn't really want to do. So it is a shock to him when Elizabeth prevaricates. Now, Elizabeth is the ultimate survivor, as we've talked about. She's also brilliantly intelligent. And the problem she has is that people expect her to marry. And these men, these very many powerful men, if she turns them down, they're not just going to go and put a few Tudor Facebook posts up. They really could involve in vengeance. So she really strings Philip along. She says, well, maybe not. I don't know. But she tries to keep him on side because she knows that he is incredibly powerful and she does not want him to invade. And this question of threat is sort of multiplied when Mary, Queen of Scots, at the age of 18, comes back to claim her throne a few years after Elizabeth comes to the throne.
So Elizabeth's come to the throne in England, and just 3 years later?
A few years later, yes. Mary, Queen of Scots, is widowed in France. So she was married to the King of France. He dies of a terrible ear brain infection. She comes back as an 18-year-old widow, and she's been Queen of Scotland since she was just a few days old. But now she's going to claim the throne of Scotland properly, and she comes back to be Queen of Scotland. Now, Mary, Queen of Scots, I've written a whole book on Mary, Queen of Scots. She gets a lot of unfair criticism because Scotland was a totally different place to England in terms of security. But Mary, Queen of Scots, she wants to make a friendship with Elizabeth, and she talks about having a meeting. Elizabeth's advisors, they are terrified of Mary, Queen of Scots. All Mary, Queen of Scots wants to do is govern Scotland and live there. And to govern Scotland and be allowed to govern there.
Who is it who's saying that Elizabeth is illegitimate? I mean, who's putting around this
Catholic Europe. So all of Catholic Europe.
And is Mary going along with this? Is Mary sort of saying, no, leave my cousin alone? She's
Mary,
not
Queen of
illegitimate?
Scots, unfortunately, when she was in France, the King of France decided that by getting his son married to Mary, Queen of Scots, then he just got Scotland, but he also got England. So when she was young and married, he put up loads of signs saying, she's the Queen of England. But Mary, Queen of Scots, never does say that herself. She always says she's the Queen of Scotland. Even in exile, she says she's the Queen of Scotland, not the Queen of England. It's very clear that what she wants to do is govern Scotland and have Elizabeth's support in that. She doesn't want England, but she's easily monstered, easily attacked, and Elizabeth's advisors are terrified that Elizabeth will die without an heir, and in will come Mary, Queen of Scots. And they say, she's going to be like Mary the First and turn the whole world Catholic. No! But actually, Mary, Queen of Scots doesn't turn Scotland Catholic. There's been a Protestant Reformation. She keeps it as it is. She keeps Protestants and Catholics on her council.
Any burnings, any beheadings, any hangings?
It's not like Mary the First. So, I mean, Mary, Queen of Scots is been monstered as sort of extremist and ridiculous
a
plotter, and she's also attacked because she does try to marry and they're a disaster, but she tries. So she's very unfairly characterised, and Elizabeth sees that, and I think she does think we could perhaps make an alliance. She's my cousin, she's a fellow woman.
Elizabeth might not perceive her as a threat, but as you say, around Elizabeth are these very canny, hawkish.
You think everyone's a threat?
Who are slightly paranoid. She's got this famous spy network, hasn't she? They've got ears to the ground everywhere. Walsingham, we always hear about as being her kind of spy master.
Walsingham is Elizabeth's spy master. Walsingham is this genius creator of this huge network of, I have to say, very poorly paid spies. A lot of them are students living in Europe.
It's the first developed sort of MI5, MI6 spy network that England has, right? It's the first time we have a sort of state surveillance operation.
It's a state surveillance operation, and they are recruited in terms of their loyalty to the country, loyalty to the new religion, and it is this setup, and it is to strengthen the position of the Queen. And how frustrating it is to Francis Walsingham that every time he comes to her with intelligence of a plot, Elizabeth says, I'm sure that's just nothing. I really don't believe that. I'll be absolutely fine. And, this is Walsingham's desire. So Mary, Queen of Scots does, just to shorten what happens, but she has one terrible husband, two terrible husbands. Her half-brother rises up against her. She flees. She's in prison. She's forced to abdicate. She flees into England. She crosses over. And then after that, she's put in Carlisle Castle and put under house arrest. So Elizabeth has Mary, Queen of Scots living in England under house arrest pretty much throughout much of her early reign. Yep. And all the time, Walsingham and the spies are saying, look at all these plots Mary, Queen of Scots is getting involved in. Elizabeth says, no, she's fine. She's in a castle. Nothing is going to happen.
So we have, at home, we've got Elizabeth consolidating her throne. She's taking this sort of centrist position with religion, not being too nasty to the Catholics, being very wary of the Calvinists, of the sort of extreme Protestants.
Especially because some of them said we don't like female monarchs, and then when Elizabeth comes to the person, I didn't mean you, And as Mary, Queen of Scots continues in her prison, Elizabeth's advisors want to get rid of her, but over and over again, there's no proof that anything is being done. And the problem is that they're in this well, I mean, it's sort of a double bind because Elizabeth's advisors imprisoned Mary Queen of Scots so tightly, they say, that no flea could get in. But if no flea can get in, then she can't plot anything. So there's sort of this great setup that Mary is put in a castle and one of Walsingham's codebreakers is also put in the castle. And then the letters that Mary sends back and forth, they are taken by the codebreaker, they are decoded, he has all the codes, decoded, and then sent on again. Anthony Babington writes her a letter saying, I've got a great idea for a plot. And Mary asks for, she doesn't agree, she doesn't disagree. And this is enough for Elizabeth.
The dynamite.
That's the dynamite.
Elizabeth's spy masters have been waiting
they
for
get it.
prove.
It's hangman. They get it. They've got her. That's what they say. They put her on trial. Mary keeps saying, you can't put me on trial. I'm a monarch. I'm a monarch of a different country. And they sentence her to death.
So it's the Babington Plot that's going to do for Mary Queen of Scots eventually. But Kate, I mean, there have been other plots building up, haven't there? I mean, tell us, there's one called the Ridolfi Plot.
I mean, I think the Ridolfi Plot is a total red herring. It's possibly a setup to try and encourage Elizabeth to take the Mary Queen of Scots threat seriously, because she won't. She will not take it seriously. She doesn't want to execute Mary Queen of Scots. She says, just leave her in the prison, because Elizabeth feels that Mary Queen of Scots, she's a woman, she's her cousin, and you can't execute a queen, because if you execute a queen, that's going to open up a whole can of worms. So Elizabeth won't take the plot seriously. Now, the Ridolfi Plot is another one of these Catholic plots that are really, the idea is of all these plots is that Elizabeth will be deposed, Philip will invade, the Catholics of England will rise up, and Mary will come on the throne of England. That's the principle of all these plots. But when Walsingham comes to her with the evidence of the Babington Plot, that she really has to, she has to put Mary on trial. So she puts Mary on trial. Mary is sentenced to death for treason against Elizabeth. But then what Elizabeth wants to do is keep Mary on death row. She doesn't want to execute Mary because she doesn't want to execute a fellow queen. She fears the vengeance of Philip of Spain. You can see why not. I mean, Elizabeth doesn't want to execute anyone. She wants to keep things calm. She does not want to execute Mary Queen of Scots because that will cause total chaos. Now, Elizabeth's advisors aren't having that. So when Elizabeth signs the death warrant, as they pretty much compel her to do, they literally take it from her and they enact it as fast as they can without her knowing it. So Mary is told very swiftly that you are to be executed next morning. She writes to the King of Spain. It's a heartbreaking letter, her last ever letter. I am to be executed like a criminal at 8 a.m. Elizabeth is now very fearful for what will happen next. It's 1587, and what will happen next? She fears Philip will invade. Well, unfortunately, we like to imagine, don't we, that with the Spanish Armada in 1588, that it was all started by the Spanish. But I'm afraid to say there was a lot of, who started it? There's a lot of English raids on the Spanish. Now, we have the undeclared Anglo-Spanish War from 1585. And essentially, Elizabeth's pirates, let's put it that way, it's Francis Drake and it's John Hawkins. And I love it when Dan Snow describes them as, they're not kind of buttoned up Navy men, these are sort of hoary-handed men. And really what pushes Philip over the edge is the execution of Mary is a real problem for Catholic Europe. And also then there's a raid on Galicia, and 30 of Philip's ships are attacked and burned by Sir Francis Drake. And really, Philip of Spain has to admit that he's got to fight back at this point, because when Drake and Hawkins were out there privateering and pirating and taking Spanish ships, Elizabeth pretended she didn't know. She was like, I don't know. Oh no, what are they doing? I mean, she did, and she also gave them a few presents, rather large presents. But Philip can pretend that Elizabeth doesn't know, she doesn't know, he doesn't know. And Drake's actual invasion on Spanish soil, I mean, that's just too much.
So it's essentially a number of factors that are driving us towards what I always think is the most famous episode in Elizabeth's reign. You've got Philip is annoyed that Elizabeth has turned him down as a husband. Philip is annoyed, as is Catholic Europe, that you've got this Protestant queen. And Philip is annoyed that that Elizabeth has chopped the head off nice Catholic Mary Queen of Scots, and Philip is very annoyed that Elizabeth's privateering, pirating sailors, Francis Drake et al. Have been burning his ship. So finally, that's the straw that breaks the
He's
camel's
had
back.
enough. I mean, he's not in good health. I think really he wants to put his feet up and do a bit of 16th century crosswording, but he has to. And
right, let's nail this British Queen, English Queen.
Yes, the Pope's also excommunicated Elizabeth, so this does make it easier to have great religious vengeance on her.
Okay. Well, so 1588, it's spring gives way to summer, and the Spanish fleet sets sail to not just teach England a lesson, but to invade it properly. And the plan is that this fleet of, I think it's about 150, 160 ships, good 8,000, 9,000 sailors, plus lots of soldiers on board, are going to sail up from Spain, and they're going to sail round the top of France. They're going to sail up the English Channel, and then they're going to meet up with the Duke of Parma and his army of, I think, about 30,000 men who are in the Netherlands, sort of Holland as we call it today. And they're all going to meet up. And from there, together, they're then going to cross the Channel at a fairly narrow point and invade England and either beat, defeat, execute, imprison, whatever. But anyway, kick Elizabeth off her throne. That's the plan in the summer of 1588. But it starts to go wrong quite quickly, doesn't it, Kate?
Well, it does start to go wrong. And, well, one of the problems is that Philip puts in the Duke of Medina Sidonia, who has not had experience in sea battles. And
it's a fairly elementary mistake when you're sending a fleet off to invade another part of the world.
He's actually quite good at encouraging people. But the problem is that there's a moment when the weather isn't good. There's endless problems with the weather. And when they sail up, the English fleet is in Plymouth, and there's a possibility that they could have sort of cornered them there and attacked them there, and they do not do that. And that, for me, is a real miss, because when they don't do that, instead, the English fleet, who are faster, they come out and they pretty much corner them.
Yeah, I mean, there is a tactic. Well, there are the two differences, I suppose, between these fleets to keep it simple. But I mean, the Spanish naval tactics are to sail big ships and attack little ships and try and board them and get lots of soldiers to invade the little ship and capture it. The English have, as you say, smaller, more maneuverable ships, and their tactics are to not get too close to these big hulking Spanish ships, but to move around them and take pot shots at them with their guns and hit them that way. And that's really what happens as the Spanish start sailing up the Channel. And as you say, they go past Plymouth, where the English fleet is. And the prevailing wind, always in England, and particularly in the Channel, it tends to blow from the west to the east. So the Spanish sort of come past Plymouth, and Drake, it's good old Francis Drake again, although he's not in charge, is he? He's number two.
So Howard is in charge. Lord Howard is in charge. Vice Admiral is Francis Drake. And Rear Admiral is John Hawkins. So the two men who've been the biggest thorns in Philip's side are now commanding the enemy navy. I mean, what an insult.
Yeah, and they start to, they come out of Plymouth, and they've got the wind advantage. And also, obviously, they know the coast better than the Spanish. And they start sort of harrying this Spanish fleet. And of course, it's a huge Spanish fleet, and it's got big warships in it. But it's also got a lot of other smaller ships in it, because it's not just designed to fight battles, it's designed for invasions. So they've got landing craft, they've got what they call merchantmen, ships that are sort of full of supplies. So there's this great, and as you say, Armada is the word for fleet. It is a big fleet. And it's making its way up the English Channel. And it's got the English sort of chasing, and every now and then popping out from behind a wave and letting rip and firing guns and generally upsetting the Spanish. But the Spanish commander, Medina Sidonia, he's got his orders, which are get up the Channel and meet up with the Duke of Parma and his soldiers, then invade England.
Those are his orders.
Those are his orders.
Yeah.
So he sticks to his orders. And of course, the Howard of Effingham, Francis Drake, John Hawkins fleet, their orders are just keep whacking the Spanish when you can. And so as the Armada makes its way up the Channel, that's what they do, and they're very good at coming in to windward. That's on the sort of windy side of the Spanish. And you know, I'm a sailor. Do you do much sailing, Kate? Have you ever been sailing?
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's not me who's been to Jackie Onassis' private island like you have. So,
Well,
you're the sailing expertise. If someone has to be in charge of the Armada, it's you. Yes, I'm not commanding it.
Well, all I can say is that generally, if you're as they say upwind, if you're the one nearer the wind, you're more manoeuvrable. You can move around. These are ships that entirely depend on the direction of the wind. They're very sluggish, and nobody can sail into the wind. You need the wind to push you along. So if the Spanish are downwind, i.e. you've got the wind...
Well, the Spanish ships are too big to sail into the wind.
No ships can sail into the wind. You can sail at an angle to the wind, but the English ships are lighter. They're better at manoeuvring. And so they are, if you like, they're sort of probing lightweights with guns, who are gradually getting the better of these sort of large, unwieldy Spanish ships that find it much harder to turn, and also are very overloaded with soldiers and equipment because they're heading to invade. And so as the Spanish move up the Channel, the English are taking more and more pot shots. And at one point, and of course you're always at the mercy of the weather. Summer weather in the Channel can be very fickle.
It's amazing to think, isn't it, that such a huge operation could be so easily scuppered by the wind.
Well, the wind is all. I mean, in those days, the wind, the weather, it's everything. So finally, Medina Sidonia gets to, he gets more or less to where he's supposed to be. He's anchored off Calais. And that's where he's going to meet up with this force from
finally
the
the Duke of Parma turns up, even though he's lost quite a few of his soldiers to illness. So
he's lost quite a few to illness, and it turns out that his preparations are not quite so good. So a lot of these boats and ships that they need for this invasion are not quite ready. So there's a lot of sort of hanging around. And they're just sitting there at anchor.
Why are they? So in this crescent formation, aren't they? That's the special crescent formation.
It's designed to put the big ships on the outside to protect the weaker ships in the middle. But they're anchored there off Calais. And so Francis Drake and his gang do what they're particularly good at, which is to terrify the Spanish with fire ships. Yeah. So they wait till nightfall. And they've got these ships which they pack full of, possibly packed full of explosives. Nobody quite knows. And they set them on fire. And because they're upwind, they can just point these ships in the direction of the Spanish fleet that is at anchor. And suddenly the Spanish are there, anchored, waiting. And when you're at anchor, you're very vulnerable. You know, you can't just turn on the engine and leave. You've got to pull up your anchor, pull up your sails. You know, it's a slow business getting a big Spanish warship moving. So they're there at night. Suddenly they see 8 blazing English fire ships heading towards them, and they think, "Crikey, if we hang around here, we're going to catch fire. We've got loads of gunpowder on board. You know, we're going to either explode, sink, burn, whatever. We better get the hell out of here." And when you're trying to get out in a hurry, what you do is you just chop your anchor rope. You don't have time to pull up your anchor. It takes too long. So they're all busy just getting rid of their anchors, whatever means they can. It's quick, guys. We've got to get out of here. So immediately their formation is falls apart. They lose a lot of them lose their anchors, which is going to be a big problem later on, where they're going to need those anchors because of the weather.
That is a problem, isn't it?
And what the British fire ships, England, I must stop saying British because Britain doesn't actually exist until 1707 in the Act of Union. We're still talking England here. And the English disrupt. They've basically broken up the Spanish fleet. And then the next day,
And isn't there a moment where Drake ambles off because he thinks, well, there's some treasure to get, and he leaves all the rest of his men in the dark?
Yes, you can't, old habits die hard, but overall, this is the moment for the English to strike, and they do. And the next day, it's August the 8th, and the English come in and they make merry. They take out a lot of Spanish ships, and some of these ships by now, of course, they've lost their anchors, and you need your anchor. If the wind changes direction, if you're getting too close to the shore, you need your anchor to sort of hold you off the shore. But if you've chopped the rope in the middle of the night, you can't do that. So you've got ships running aground, some of them are shipwrecked, some of them sink, I think one or two blow up. And essentially at this point, the Armada has blown it. And the weather is still pushing these Spanish ships sort of further east. So they've got, if you like, they've gone the whole along the whole bottom side of England, from Cornwall all the way up to Kent, and they're now being pushed out. The wind's pushing them out into the North Sea.
So they're sort of chasing them, saying, "You go home now." But they're chasing them. They'll have to go up around Scotland.
And what are they going to do? How are you going to get home? You can either go all the way up the east coast of England, around Scotland, all the way down past Ireland, and get home that way, or you could wait for the weather to change and chance your arm and sail back up the English Channel. But that's full of English ships waiting to take
your treasure.
So it all comes to a head in this epic battle off the north coast of France, a place called Gravelines. It's not a sort of everything's all over and done. It's not like the Battle of Trafalgar.
The rest of them kind of limp off, don't they, and try and get round Scotland.
It's all piecemeal.
And then round by Scotland, they're
heading off in that direction.
Scotland.
But their ships are going to get lost the whole way around the British Isles, and actually it gets particularly grim when they start coming back down. The orders have been given out that if any Spanish ship is wrecked, you kill all the survivors. There's no sort of some poor shipwrecked chap coming ashore on the beach and sort of giving him a glass of brandy and taking him prisoner. So essentially, after the Battle of Gravelines, we're still at the bottom right-hand corner, for those of you with a map in your mind, the sort of Kent, northern France bit of the Channel. That's where the Armada is scattered. And what I find fascinating is at the very moment this sort of win is happening, this is the moment, Kate, when Elizabeth I, and who doesn't know the result, because communications take ages in those days, by this point, she's in the east coast port of Tilbury, which is sort of out of London to the east on the north side of the Thames.
It's Essex now, isn't it?
She's in Essex, and that's where a lot of troops, that's where a lot of English troops are gathered. They're ready to fight off this imminent. At any minute, they're expecting the Spanish ships to arrive and start attacking. And so she, very much a sort of warrior queen at this point, goes to rally the troops and delivers one of the great speeches, doesn't she?
Well, this is the Tilbury speech, and as you say, it comes after the Battle of Gravelines, and she's been advised by all her advisors not to go. It's too dangerous, and she insists on going, and they find her some body armour, so she goes in body armour, and she's made.
She really is wearing body armour, because in the painting she wears it. I wonder whether that's.
I think we believe her to be the case that she's got to wearing some kind of armour. It is dangerous where she is now. That you're absolutely right, Robert. It has been mythologised. The image of her. There's been various versions of it. It's been really hyped up. The whole image of Gloriana there. But we do believe she's wearing some kind of armour because it's so dangerous. And she's out there with the troops and she sees this as her duty. And of course, there's this line that is said over, the most famous line uttered by Elizabeth I, or perhaps any British monarch, is that I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king and a king of England too. So she's not just saying I'm the king, she's also talking about her inheritance from Henry VIII. But the whole speech is, it is rousing stuff.
I'll let you read it, Kate.
Yeah, I am come amongst you, as you see at this time, not for my recreation in this sport, but being resolved in the midst and heat of battle. It's not, is it? They're actually not fighting. To live and die amongst you all, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and for my people, my honour and my blood, even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too. and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare invade the borders of my realm, to which rather than any dishonour should grow by me, I will myself take up arms. I will myself take up arms. I myself will be your general, judge and rewarder of every one of your virtues in the field. And then she goes on and she says, you have deserved rewards and crowns, and we do assure you, on the words of a prince, they shall be duly paid. I mean, stirring stuff. I will fight with you. I'm going to be your general, your judge, your rewarder. And I mean, I wanted to call my book coming out this year, Regina, I wanted to call it Weak and Feeble. I thought that would be a great title. And everyone said to me it was going to be a terrible title. Do you think it's a terrible title?
I think it's a good subtitle.
I think it'd be really funny. I think it'd be such a good ironic title. And everyone said, I think that's the worst title ever, Kate. Well, one day I will self-publish my book and I call it
maybe
Weak and Feeble.
the paperback. Maybe call it Weak and Feeble. But I think you're better off, Kate, calling your book Regina.
Regina, A New History of Women in Power, because it could have been Weak and Feeble, but no. Regina, A New History of Women in Power. I accept that other people were right, but I do love the weak and feeble, because of course she's not weak and feeble, is she? She's a powerful
absolutely
queen.
But you know, this is eons before anything approaching mass communications. Most people can't read or write. There's no newspapers. I mean, how does this speech get disseminated? How do people find out about it?
Well, this is an interesting question. Now, there are various versions, up to about, I think it's about 6 different versions of the Tilbury speech. The one we have, which we believe to be the most accurate, is written by Lionel Sharp, who was attached to the Earl of Leicester. He's with the forces, and he sends it to the Duke of Buckingham. He'll later be in the household of the Duke of Buckingham, and he writes it in a letter. So I think that we think Lionel Sharp's version is the most likely to be true. Because, I mean, let's remember, even if, as we believe he was, Lionel Sharp is standing there listening. I mean, you must, as a reporter, you must stand there and have to remember exactly what someone says without a tape recorder sometimes.
Well, without a microphone, particularly when you're standing near the sea, it can get quite loud. So I just wonder how this word spreads. People soon gather that we've got a tough queen. She came up with this great speech, and you could just imagine this is sort of being retold in sort of pubs and taverns and dockyards around the country. We just think, okay, Spanish Armada, great win, that's it, Spain humiliated.
End of that, bye-bye.
Actually, not, because the very next year, and it's a sort of hubristic overreaction, but there's an English armada that set sail to go and whack Spain.
Not commanded by the usual suspects, not commanded by Drake and Hawkins.
Afraid it is, actually. It's like, Francis, what are you doing? Well, not much. Well, would you mind taking an armada in the opposite direction and having a go at the Spanish? And so the English armada goes back the other way the next year. And that's a shambles as well. That's a total disaster. I think we had round about 150 ships in that one. And a good third of them never came home.
But that one is kind of crossed out of history, isn't it? We like to remember the battles that we won.
It is, but then on the back of that,
about that one.
On the back of that, and then after that, old Drake and Hawkins, having fought off one armada, having led another, they then go off. And do
they're
some
cousins, aren't they? I think they're related.
I don't know how they're related, but they go off on a sort of pirate expedition to the Caribbean, where in fact they both die eventually. So that's the end of that chapter.
Yes, see you.
But
slavery
at which point, Philip of Spain thinks, I know what I'll do, and I'll have another armada. So 1596. Drake is, by this point, Drake and Hawkins have died, and yet England sends another armada. So we've had the Spanish Armada comes over, gets beaten. The English Armada goes over, gets beaten. The English try another armada in 1596. It's sort of, mixed results. The new hero of the hour is the Earl of Essex, who's a sort of a big favourite, another sort of swashbuckling figure. He whacks quite a few Spanish ships. So guess what? Spain sends another armada back in return. So by this point, we've had 2 Spanish armadas, 2 English armadas. The second Spanish Armada doesn't do very well. A year after that, Spain sends a third Armada. So we're now on Spanish Armada number 3. That one is, again, a shambles. You'd have thought by now people realise that Armadas just aren't a very good idea. No one has actually sent an Armada, with the possible exception of the Earl of Essex's one, which has sort of, had mixed results. And actually, there is one further Armada. There's a fourth Spanish Armada after Philip II dies. His son Philip III comes to the throne. He sends one to team up with the Irish in 1601. It's 1601, and that's a disaster as well. And they end up surrendering to the English. So
because by this point, Elizabeth is older. There's no chance of her having a child. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see so many of these armadas, because they think this is our chance. The Queen is at the end of, perhaps coming to the end of her reign. I mean, she's still in good health, but she's older by comparative standards, and she's less and less popular. So Elizabeth's popularity really declines in the end of her reign. There are bad harvests, poverty. And where's the heir? Where's the heir that's going to continue Gloriana's vision? And so these Spanish armadas, I think, are quite aiming to sort of seize the moment.
But none of them work.
So Elizabeth is the ultimate survivor, but she's also the ultimate watcher. She has spent the first 25 years of her life watching and learning, and those lessons are what she puts into practice.
Well, this episode, we've been looking at her power and how she exercises it and how she amplifies it. I think we should not overlook one other thing, which is taking off under her watch. And those are the first sort of seeds, if you like, of English, soon to be British imperialism. And with that, of course, the very dark chapter of the transatlantic slave trade. We've touched on that earlier.
This is what Drake and Hawkins are trying to get hold of the Spain
Drake and
slave
Hawkins
ships.
are the first to understand that if you can take captured, enslaved people across the Atlantic, put them to work, there's money in that. And that's going to be picked up on.
And it is something that is fostered from the royal court.
And it's another example of how Elizabeth sees her place on the world stage, sees how she's going to make England rich, powerful, and stronger than its neighbours. But that's all we have time for on this episode. Do join us again next time, where we're going to start looking at Elizabeth's love life. But for now, from me, Robert Hardman.
And from me, Kate Williams.
Goodbye.
Bye.